Hey friends, our immigration policy was once summed up by President Teddy Roosevelt in this simple phrase: one flag, one language, one loyalty. That pretty much captures it, but we're a long way from that. And the recent Supreme Court decision on birthright citizenship has been called by many conservatives an act of cultural suicide. We're going to talk about the ins and outs of that, and what the part where we feel like the biggest problems lie, and what it means for the future of our children and grandchildren if this ruling is not corrected. So you don't want to miss this podcast today. We hope you'll tune in.
Hey, welcome to the Ron Johnson Discipleship Podcast.
Hey, normally we are, right on top of whatever's fresh happening in a brand new week, but I am out of town the week this is airing. And so Andrew and I, for those of you who are really up on fashion and you pay a lot of attention to the wardrobe that we bust out every week, I still have my hat under the table, by the way.
I try to hide it.
My ham and bears hat is under the table, but we're still wearing our very cool blue outfits.
We're doing time traveling. We're traveling to the future.
See, most of the men, just in case, but no, I'm going to keep it.
Save it.
Deception here.
Most of the men are going, what? They don't really care about what we wore, but maybe the ladies, my mom might have noticed I wore the same outfit. 2 podcasts in a row now. But anyway, we were talking about the very important topic last time we were together about the Mamdani Marxist speech behind our first president's desk, which just grieves me to no end that this is where we've...
How do you get it? How does that work? Can I have his desk shipped to my house? Is this how this works?
Oh my gosh. I think about our nation's founding and about the greatness of George Washington. That man should not with George Washington, but this mayor should be nowhere near that desk. It's just a disgrace. But anyway, part of what we want to talk about today, that was the Marxist speech that was denigrating America. But a lot of this deals with the larger immigration issue. He intentionally, there's really kind of a macabre kind of scene. He's surrounded by immigrants who had just assimilated, which that's wonderful. But the folks were standing there with no emotion, holding on to a little American flag. It looked like really weird. Like, what are you people doing? There was no excitement, no passion. And I had to notice as I'm looking, most of those folks looked like they were coming from a Middle Eastern country, which there's a good chance it was some Islamic country. They should have been doing cartwheels now that they're in America and American citizens, because the life that they have and the opportunities that they have in this nation are nowhere near the cesspool nation that I'm sure that they came from. So they should be like elated, and they're standing there like zombies with no expression while this madman, basically assaults America and everything she stands for. It was disgraceful to me. But it brings up the larger point of assimilation and citizenship that I think would be good for us to address today, because we can't keep up with some of the major things that happen. One of them was a recent Supreme Court ruling that we're going to get into. But before we get into that, I was thinking, I wonder what assimilation in America, what was it when you came to Ellis Island and, you wanted to become an American? What was involved in that? Because I don't really, nowadays, however you get in here, you climb over the fence, you drill, dig a tunnel, you get dropped in by a parachute. I mean, Democrats don't really care how you got in the country nowadays. They just think as long as you're here, you're one of us. But that's not the way it always used to be. And I want to read this because I said, hey, let's go back, say, 150 years, like roughly the 1870s. What was the legal process? And so this was under the Naturalization Act of 1802, which was still largely governing life here in America at the turn of the century. This was the requirements to immigrate properly into this country. Number one, and I didn't realize this, you had to live in the United States for at least 5 years. So you had to put some temporary, at least, roots down. You had to be around a while. You couldn't just come in and boom, you're instantly an American citizen. You had to file a declaration of intention. These were the first papers, usually at least 2 years before final citizenship. So then we had a character issue. You had Excuse me.
Bless you.
You had to demonstrate good moral character. And of course, those words are ambiguous unless they have a biblical worldview understanding. What is good? What is moral? What is character? Renounce allegiance to any foreign ruler, prince, or state. And lastly, take an oath of allegiance to the United States. Now, there was no test or anything like that people had to take. But to many Americans, this is what it meant. You had to learn English. If you're going to be an American, that's what we speak. You had to learn English. You had to adopt American civic ideals and constitutional government. So right there's no question about Sharia law. We're not functioning under Sharia law. You have to adopt our civic ideals and our constitutional form of government. You had to participate in local community life. In other words, you had to be one of us. You couldn't form an enclave where you just all hang out with your people from your nation that you came from. You had to understand America's history and our institutions. And you had to shift your primary loyalty away from your homeland toward the United States. This is important. You're going to raise your children as Americans rather than as permanent members of a foreign national community living in the United States. So this is good. So if you're going to have a child, and we got into this a little bit with some of our members as it relates to the whole black-white issue. So say you're in a mixed marriage, and you have a child. How are you going to raise that child? Well, according to the assimilation process, you raise your child not as a black American or a white American, but you raise them as an American. So, and the argument was coming out, well, I want to raise my son as a black man in America. I want him to have a black man's identity. Well, he's not completely a black man. He's part black and he's part white. And so from a Christian perspective, you raise your son as a kingdom man first. He's a follower of Christ. He's part of the kingdom of God. And secondly, he's an American, not as a certain color of skin or pigmentation or even ethnic background. So yes, you can celebrate. I came here. My grandmother came over on the boat from Germany, and there's a lot of great German food. There was some German customs that they enjoyed, but they never considered themselves German Americans. They were Americans. They enjoyed some of the food and all of that, but they didn't go under the German rule of government or anything like that. Their identity had to shift. They had to embrace what it meant to become an American. And this is interesting because this whole idea of melting pot, when you throw a bunch of things in a pot and it all melts together, it loses its individual identity and the flavor becomes all of the things that are thrown in the pot. And that concept doesn't even make sense if we continue to hold on to our ethnic ideologies, our ethnic backgrounds, our ethnic, philosophies, governments that we came out of, as you pointed out last week. So there was a lot of things that I'm not seeing happening right now. Swearing allegiance to the United States of America as your primary loyalty. The oath required you to announce prior obligations and to accept the authority of the U.S. Constitution. Duties of citizenship, including jury service and military service when required, loyalty to the nation's welfare and security, and you had to participate in self-government. In other words, you're not going to come here and we're going to support you, which we saw with this whole Somali population. Nobody up there, or hardly any up there, have a job. They're all on welfare. That's not what self-government is all about. And this was important. Americans of that era distinguished between residence and citizenship. One could live in America and enjoy many freedoms, but citizenship implied entering a covenant of mutual obligation with the republic. That's a big distinction. And I love this. President Teddy Roosevelt said this, Americans are under one flag, one language, one loyalty. So when you see all these flags from the nations people came from, hanging from buildings and draped on their cars and all this kind of stuff, it's really un-American. We're glad that you're here, but you should have one flag now, and we shouldn't be hanging all these crazy other flags because we're under one flag, one language, and our loyalty is for one country. Man, we're a long way from that, and it kind of leads us to the SCOTUS ruling, a recent Supreme Court ruling, dealing with this whole birthright, and we've talked about this birthright citizenship. I'll give the summary here, and then let's talk about this a little bit, because as I said, I like introducing that assimilation process because it gives some teeth to what should be happening, and none of these things that we just mentioned are happening under birthright citizenship. There is no assimilation. It's just you got born here. This was a summary from the SCOTUS blog. The court strikes down President Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship, holding that children born in the U.S. to parents unlawfully or temporarily present are subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and are citizens at birth. This is just mind-boggling to me, especially when we're talking about parents who are here unlawfully or parents who are only here temporarily, that they are somehow under the jurisdiction of the United States. These folks have no attachment to the United States. In fact, the first group are actually criminals.
Openly breaking the rules and laws.
Breaking the rules and laws of the United States of America, and we're going to bless them for their behavior by giving their children citizenship in this country.
Incentivize them to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Incentivize them, that's a good word. Of course, this ruling came with a lot of very strong responses. One of the most, this was Stephen Miller, one of the most destructive and outrageous decisions in the long history of the Supreme Court. American citizenship is not the birthright of the world. It belongs only and solely to Americans. No provision of the Constitution can be read to require our national self-obliteration. Strong ruling. He said, if your ruling requires you to suicide your civilization, your reading of the Constitution is wrong. He said, this is absolutely a deep knife wound in the heart of the American Republic. There is no possible reading of the 14th Amendment that applies to foreigners with foreign loyalties, foreign citizenship, foreign obligations, foreign everything. What do you think about Stephen Miller's take?
I think he has a deep understanding of how a nation is destroyed. I think it's what we talked about last week. A nation's divided in their values cannot stand. Empires are destroyed that way. They fall apart from within, from division, and then something external comes and destroys them. But they have to fall apart from within first. I think the problem is people don't have the same basis of, they don't understand what destruction looks like. I think this is not articulated well let me say, I think American education system has cloud effect. Of not teaching. We keep saying diversity is our strength. Diversity is our strength. When Donnie comes and says our strength is because all these people come from bring their unique perspective. We talk about our rainbow. That's diversity and strength.
Yeah, diversity, even including you can be whatever gender you want, and there's unlimited numbers of genders you can be, and all that's supposedly somehow a strength.
But I study organizational structures. I look at business books. I look at a family. I look at a healthy church. What makes an organization healthy? It's not rocket science. House divided against itself cannot stand. That's biblical. Okay. Yeah. Diversity in what's important to you, in the focus, in the vision, in the goal, or lack of clarity destroys itself. Yes. So when you import all these different people with different values, different agendas, different direction they want to go, how is the nation going to survive against that? So the assimilation process you described before is basically our attempt. I don't even know that's that creative assimilation process, but it's at least an attempt to say, hey, we're gonna make sure the right people, the right value comes in, and if they don't have the right values,
there's a reason why we did not allow a lot of people from the Middle East, from an Islamic nation, to come into our country for this very reason. It's not because the people are bad. It's because the ideology that they hold is completely incompatible with assimilating into American culture.
When a business hires somebody, a good business will not just hire based on, I'm going to see your resume, you have the experience to do that. That's important. I want to hire based on core values.
Right.
Do you align with how our company operates? I'm not even making a judgment and say, hey, you're wrong. We're just saying we're just incompatible.
These are our values. This is how we do business.
This is how we do things. And vetting that properly, that's how healthy organization grow and thrives. This is a very simple concept. And what Stephen Miller is saying, Supreme Court decision is saying, we have to take that the factor to assimilation, to whether they are a citizen or not, citizens, not just residents, is not based on whether they align with value or they're willing to go through the assimilation process to hopefully they will adopt our value. It's by some basic transactional stuff that's beyond like their control. It's not because of choice. And again, like that's what he's saying. And that will lead to division and destruction of our nation. Now, I think we need to articulate that a little bit more to the greater population.
Yeah. We've got some work to do just to educate our own people to these truths. You know, I love here Matt Walsh never one to mince words. He said, quote, "The idea that a pregnant woman from Guatemala can sprint across the U.S. border, have a baby in 30 minutes after arriving here, and the baby is magically a citizen of the U.S. is one of the most retarded and indefensible notions ever conceived." I wish I understood how Matt felt about certain things. That's pretty straightforward, but that's exactly what the Supreme Court just allowed. Just get into the country, have your baby. It doesn't matter if you're here legally or how you got here. It doesn't matter if you have a criminal record. It doesn't matter if you hate the United States. Just get into the country somehow and have a baby, and that baby is a citizen. And he brings out, I love leftist thinking because it's full of all kinds of incongruencies. He says sarcastically, remember, the Somalian who was born to illegal immigrant parents 23 years ago has a birthright to be in this country. But you and I are invaders who have no right to be here, even though our family has been in this country for 200 years. So they all go back. We see this now before, in Chicago, before they open any kind of event, they always have to have a representative of the Hootsie Tootsie tribe come up because we supposedly stole their land 200 years ago, and we really shouldn't be here because we're invaders and we have no real legal standing in this country. So Matt's point is we've been here for 200 years and we don't have legal standing according to the left. But a Guatemalan woman, or it doesn't matter, we're not picking on Guatemala, whatever nation in the world can come here and have a baby and they have legal standing. I mean, it's just absolutely farcical. And I think he does a good job pointing that out.
I got another one. This is from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I'd like to congratulate President Xi and the great country of China on their massive birthright citizenship win.
Yeah. Talk about that, though, because, of course, the Chinese have globalist dominion intention. They want to see communism spread across the world. So how is this really playing into the communist strategy, and what are they doing to exploit our stupidity?
Loopholes. Yeah, you're like, hey, you know what? Here's a way to infiltrate our nations. Here's a loophole we'll let everyone know about. So they create a birthright citizenship tourism. So, we're about to have a baby, they'll ship you over here and they'll let you have the baby here, get your citizenship, then you go back home. They create a business out of it, a lucrative business out of it.
So the Chinese are actually running businesses where people pay large amounts of money to, first of all, get pregnant, then fly to America, have the baby. And so now we're having, these people could grow up to be groomed as communist spies, who knows what. But for one thing, they're not lovers of America. That's not what's behind all of this.
They know nothing about America. They're not indoctrinating anything about America. They have no alignment with our values. They might in the future once they discover who we are, but there is no evidence of that.
And when it comes to our nation being self-governed versus every communist nation is not self-governed, it's top-down. It's if you're the tallest nail, you get the hammer. It's very much conform. The party is your parent. The party is your God. This is not American, values. This is not our Constitution. This is not anything American. And yet, again, allowing these kinds of folks to come and get planted and be given citizenship, again, it is an absolute absurdity, but this is what we're seeing happen. Now, you brought out, and I was just seeing a clip online as I was preparing for the podcast this morning. It was back at the Clarence Thomas hearing. And guess who was grilling Clarence Thomas and telling him that he needed to resign because some woman that they drummed up said that Clarence had harassed her at 2 different places where she worked for him. And, of course, the obvious question was, if he harassed you at the first place, why did you follow him to the second place? But it was totally trying to smear him and to get him to resign. And guess who was the biggest mouthpiece of all that? It was none other than good old Joe Biden. Joe Biden attacking Clarence Thomas because he wasn't the right kind of black man. He actually thought for himself. He didn't think like the Democrats. He wasn't on the Democrat plantation. He wasn't a victim. He turned out to be one of our most brilliant Supreme Court justices ever. He wrote a 91-page scathing dissent highlighting the stupidity of the Supreme Court. Talk about that a little bit, because I know you dove into some of that.
He basically went to the original intent. The original intent was about...
Okay, time out right there.
Yeah.
This is because it's an originalist approach. The Constitution is not whatever you want it to be. So it makes sense. Okay, why was the 14th Amendment created? There had to be a problem that they were solving. Maybe we should go back and read historically what was actually going on. And then I like what he said too. We should read what people immediately after the ruling were saying about it, because they were the ones closest to it. So we should lean heavily on their perspective because they were closest to the ruling. So what was he saying?
Original intent was for this, because of the emancipation of the slaves, that their children of the slaves can automatically become American citizens.
That they would have a future in this country. That they would not be banned, from citizenship. So again, that's far from what the left interpreted it as. And it's just, again, it's mind-boggling. I don't know if this is I can't imagine that we're picking the most brilliant legal minds and putting them in a room and having them come up with a decision on this, and that the majority thinks this is actually a good thing and not cultural suicide. I'm wondering what's and only a time will tell what's behind the scenes. But what are these people thinking? And how in the world could this be good for our country? And how in the world could this have been even in the minds of the founders of this country? It's mind-boggling to me. So I guess the question is, where do we go from here? Because just do the math. I mean, with the number of illegal people we're still trying to get out of our country, I think it's documented at about 14 million. If all of those folks just start having babies, and a lot of them are from cultures that have more children than Americans do, just do the math over the next decade or two. And what does the United States of America look like? It's certainly not a stronger nation, as the left likes to say, or Mamdini likes to say. This does not make us stronger, especially when these people, many of them are coming saying, help me, and expecting the government through taxation and through redistribution to now give them, life insurance, health insurance, educational opportunities, buy them a car, give them a cell phone, whatever it is. The system eventually will explode, and maybe that's what they want, because Obama was running around always saying that America needed to get off the big global leader, and we needed to become kind of like the rest of the guys at the world of nations and New York, that we're just lower ourselves, come down a few notches so we could just be a team player instead of being a global leader. I don't know what they want. I mean, I'm perplexed. I really am. I'm absolutely dumbfounded, especially not that we will be arguing about people that are in this country that have been here for years legally. That's one thing that we could probably all find agreement on. But we're talking about illegal people, or people that are just passing through. Yeah, it's crazy. And one of the other things, I was looking at a lot of commentary on this, but they were talking about Thomas's opinion, and what made him so frustrating was that we did not deal with a lot of the unique situations. It was kind of like what the Supreme Court said was, we're just going to have a blanket no and slap Trump's hand, and anybody that's in this country that has a baby, it doesn't matter. The 14th Amendment says, you're good to go, you're a citizen. And that part of what Thomas's frustration is that laws are very specific and precedent is very specific. It's not blanket, because that creates a legal nightmare. And so they didn't deal with the specific situation that was brought before them. They issued a blanket ruling without thinking about what that meant. So some examples here. He said, Thomas saw this as reckless because it sweeps extreme cases the court never even paused to consider. For example, he points out that the government couldn't deny automatic citizenship even to the baby of an enemy soldier. So someone gets in this country and maybe they create a terrorist act in the name of the country they came from. If they had a baby in the country, the baby would still be a citizen of the United States, which is absurd that would happen. Or a baby of a foreign spy. So somebody's captured. It turns out that they've been spying for China or whatever country. Their baby gets to be a citizen of the United States. Or a child who's raised in another country or joins a foreign army or comes back to fight a war against the United States. He says in his words, he cannot enforce the order against a child of an alien enemy or a child of a foreign spy. He cannot even enforce the order against children who are raised in foreign countries, blah, blah, blah. I read that already. He said his view is that the court should decide the actual dispute in front of it very carefully, one situation at a time, rather than slam every possible door shut. I mean, I think he's speaking. I'm not a Supreme Court justice, and I'm not an attorney, but he seems to be speaking with a lot of common sense and wisdom. And I think out of all of the Supreme Court justices, if there's anybody I truly, truly expect his wisdom and his thoughtfulness, it's Clarence Thomas. So I don't know what your thoughts are on all of that or where we go from here.
I don't know where to go from here. I think Congress needs to act, but you know how I feel about. You know how that's going on right now. I'm as disappointed in the Republicans Democrats as I'm in the Republicans. But I mean, really becomes a lot congressional needs to act to say, hey, this birthright tours and stuff needs to be looked at, and I mean, all these and stopping illegal immigration, and I don't know. I'm a little shocked at the broad stroke ruling by the Supreme Court. So.
Yeah. Matt Walsh here again. I love what he says. He says, the actual, quote, birthright belongs to my children and the children of all real Americans. They have a birthright to live in a country that resembles the one that their ancestors established. And now that birthright, the only true birthright, has been destroyed in favor of the imagined birthright of children born to parents who don't even belong in this country and who have no ancestral or cultural ties to it whatsoever. He says total madness, suicide, words cannot describe how evil this is. And again, I look long term, I shudder to think about what's in stake or what the outcome of this could be. You know, when you think about it, okay, if that's what the ruling is, then here's some interesting thought that's been put in. He said, here's a few obvious steps that an American First Congress could take to contain the damage from the birthright citizenship ruling. Number one, abolish dual citizenship. A person can be loyal to one country, period. An adult who holds citizenship in another country should forfeit their U.S. citizenship automatically. These, again, are just policy ideas. Ban surrogate pregnancies in America for foreigners. This is interesting. He says traditional birth tourism gets more attention. We talked about that. That's equally terrible. But an even more glaring problem is that foreigners can simply stop in the United States to launch a surrogate pregnancy or even pay for a surrogacy using a sperm and egg from two people who have never been to the U.S. at all. This is already being exploited by Chinese billionaires to have literally dozens of or hundreds of U.S. citizen kids.
Wow. Never thought about that before.
That's crazy. Or criminally punish foreign birth tourism. The court says we can't deny citizenship to the birth of children of birth tourists. Fine. We can still punish their parents and enablers. And if somebody uses deception to enter the United States temporarily or have an anchor baby, they should face massive fines, if necessary, a jail sentence. And the same should go for those running birth tourist hotels and similar operations. You know, as you mentioned, this does not help healthy immigration. This forces us to slam the door on it. Like there should be a ban on immigration into this country until we get this figured out, especially from women. And are we now going to ask that women before they enter the country take a test to see if they're pregnant? Because if they're pregnant and we allow them in the country, then we just increase this number of citizens in the United States of America. I mean, this causes you to do some really terrible things that you probably shouldn't have to normally do. But when you're risking a crazy all-out explosion of every nation in the world getting into your country illegally and having babies, that's a serious problem. So, I mean, as you pointed out, closing the border is like bare minimum. But we've really got to watch, like, okay, what about the 14 million that we already have illegally in our country? Again, it amazes me that the court, who's responsible for enforcing the law, cannot understand the distinction between a person here legally and illegal. That blows my mind that Supreme Court justices don't make that distinction. I mean, that's their job.
Yeah.
So I think I'm with Matt Walsh on this one. This is cultural suicide. And I think our friend who I read from earlier, Stephen Miller, who I think is brilliant, I think he's right on. This is cultural suicide, and we got to do something to address it. Now, what's crazy is, as grown-ups, when you recognize this could be a problem and you try to solve it, you get called bigoted, you hate immigrants, you're racist. Only certain people, as Mandami said, you have to have the right color skin to be able to be a part of America. All of these things start to fly at us as accusation. And again, low information voters get sucked right into all this because it's the emotional appeal, frankly, garbage that gets people to be sucked up by their emotions, which are not even being ruled by the truth. It's kind of a false compassion thing. And I think the end result is tragic for all of us. So this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on. And I'm encouraging, I was Andy Ogles. I want to read one last thing here. Anytime a politician makes CNN really angry, I consider it a big win for the good guys. Representative Ogles said this: CNN is fuming that my Anchors Away Act will ban birth tourism and pregnant foreigners from stealing U.S. citizenship for their children and ultimately themselves. The left knows that ending birthright citizenship will massively shrink their voter base. So whether it's lack of a simple thing like a voter ID, for an election, or again, we didn't even get into this. Maybe we get into this in our next one. The fact that the Supreme Court screwed up another thing on voter integrity when they allow election results to go after the day of the election. Yep. Now they opened up for all kinds of room for fraud. I mean, our Supreme Court has been making some really, really damaging decisions that are hurting the integrity not only of election but the integrity of our immigration system, and it's just very, very disappointing. So I'm not sure what we do about that. We pray and we continue to be the church, but we need better leadership. I'll just say that. We need better leadership, and we need better Supreme
Battle
Court.
goes on.
Yeah, it does.
No easy wins.
It's a never-ending cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so stay in the fight, and thank you guys for listening. Let's stay engaged, and again, keep your hand to the plow. When we engage, we win, and obviously these are spiritual battles. I want to encourage everybody too. Let's make sure we're lifting up our country each day in prayer, praying for our leaders each day, praying for our Supreme Court for wisdom, and when elections roll around, make sure your vote counts, and make sure you might be running for office someday. That would be a good thing too. So think about these things. All right. Until we meet again, we'll see you next week.